Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with a midweek update in the world of cannabis, which include Trulieve's and Verano's earnings. So before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And then of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. Then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you're ready. But we're going to start with this news from Marijuana Moment, as they were the first to report it, that the Republican lawmakers filed a bill to tax and regulate cannabis, which is a lot more than the Dems can say they've done, because although Schumer did introduce his CAOA in the summer, it was just a draft bill. So he never even filed anything because he just wanted to see what type of votes he can get with the language that he put out. Clearly that was nothing. And so this is just coverage of what happened on Monday, where we saw Nancy Mace, Republican from South Carolina, sponsoring the bill titled the States Reform Act, along with a handful of initial Republican co-sponsors, which would end federal cannabis prohibition while taking steps to ensure that businesses in existing state markets can continue to operate unencumbered by changing federal rules. And so I just wanted to share some other outlets that took this story and featured it a few days later. So this one is from Reuters. U.S. Republicans move to decriminalize cannabis at federal level. So we love to see these headlines and this awareness getting out there. Representative Nancy Mace introduces bill to end federal cannabis prohibition. Now, what was interesting though is after she did that press conference, GOP Congresswoman's cannabis legalization bill draws fire from home state Republican Party. So if you can imagine this, shortly after Rep. Nancy Mace held a press conference formally unveiling the legislation, South Carolina Republican Party Chairman Drew McKissick issued a statement affirming that the organization opposes any effort to end prohibition and making it clear that the Congresswoman's bill is no exception. Our party's platform is clear. We support firm enforcement of existing laws against the abuse and distribution of controlled substances, and we oppose any effort to legalize the use of controlled substances, and that includes cannabis, McKissick said. So, which is just absolutely ridiculous. They're just sticking to their old beliefs, which are completely wrong and outdated, and that's not going to do them very well because they're just going to get voted out if they stick to that. But listen to this. Unequivocally, the South Carolina Republican Party is against any effort to legalize, decriminalize the use of controlled substances, and that includes this bill, the statement concludes. Well, have they looked at the data to see how many people in South Carolina have died from opioid overdoses? Probably not, because their pockets are lined with Big Pharma's money. Because on top of that, they add, since this will have widespread negative impacts, which is completely false. This is just their old, outdated beliefs. From rising crime, proven to be false in states that have legalized and in Canada. Violence, proven to be false in states that have legalized in Canada. And mental health issues in children, proven to be false in states that have legalized and in Canada. I think it's a safe bet to say that most Republicans will be against it too. Making it even more terrifying, the fact that someone with power like this can make such a false statement with so much confidence. It's unbelievable. And the fact that he's not going to be held accountable, but ultimately all I see is that this is old money Big Pharma fighting against Nancy Mace and new money sponsored by Charles Koch. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I thank you, Marijuana Moment, for sharing this because it does highlight that this reality and this viewpoint is still very real in southern states. But I think it would be nice if some other mainstream media outlets picked up this story because it would just show the stupidity that is really, being held in place by these dinosaurs in power, and hopefully it's just going to shoot themselves in the foot so that they don't get reelected next time. But I did just want to provide this update before we get into the earnings, as well as Biden signs infrastructure bill promoting cannabis research by encouraging access to dispensary products, which is definitely a smart move because considering the cannabis that the government would grow is not anywhere close to the quality that you get in dispensaries, so it's apples and oranges. So smart for President Joe Biden on Monday to sign a massive infrastructure bill that includes provisions aimed at allowing researchers to study the actual cannabis consumers are purchasing from state legal dispensaries instead of having to use only government-grown cannabis. While Biden signed the large-scale measure, a legislative accomplishment being touted by Democrats after weeks of contentious debate without specifically mentioning the cannabis provisions, which, oh yeah, you don't want to talk about cannabis when, 70% of the country wants it legalized. Unbelievable how disconnected this man is from reality. While, lastly, Schumer ties up timeline for Senate through the end of the year, as the Senate only has 3 scheduled work weeks for the rest of 2021 with a long to-do list remaining. So what does that mean for us? The Senate is likely to vote on a military policy bill this week as it awaits cost estimates on the Build Back Better legislation. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said in a letter Sunday laying out an ambiguous agenda ahead of the Senate's return to Washington. With the House pushing back consideration for the Build Back Better bill as it awaits a comprehensive score from the Congressional Budget Office to appease House moderates, the Senate is likely to consider the National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, this week, Schumer said. So what does this mean for the Safe Banking Act? Well, I want to share this tweet from Brady, Cobb, who is a DC lobbyist and insider, and he's been lobbying the Republicans on cannabis legalization since 2014. So we have him to thank for a lot of any of this progress that we've seen. But so he provides a safe NDAA update. Senate timing looks to be a possible floor vote today and tomorrow, and conference conference process looks to begin the week of November 29th. So it's a coin toss whether or not SAFE will be added into the Senate version. It's either a yes or no. However, the most likely path is via a conference process and then receding to the House position. And so deciding that we're just going to go with the House version of the bill as opposed to the SAFE, which already includes SAFE and onward. And he's pretty bullish on this. Just to add, as Merida Capital Holdings says, with another much more pragmatic path being laid out, descheduling effectively handles financing banking issues as they flow from CSA scheduling. Isn't the chance of SAFE zero? Doesn't seem too unfair for folks to be skeptical of SAFE prospects, which is totally fair. It's good for him to ask, and of course, it's possible that it doesn't happen, so we must, as investors, plan accordingly. But Brady's take disagree. SAFE has broad bipartisan support and has been teed up as part of a must pass for a reason. Mace bill will take its track through 2022 and will likely lead to a compromise bill, but SAFE is the first to go. Respect your opinion, but you are a bit off base here. I think Brady is just really confident that the most likely path is that we'll go through the conference process, and in the end, they're just going to end up passing the House version of the bill, not the Senate, and the House includes SAFE. And as for a timeline, it's worth remembering that Congress has to get this done by December 10th, because then they're done that session and they go back on holidays. So once they're done from the Thanksgiving break of November 29th, we will get our answer between November 29th and December 10th. Hopefully they don't wait till the last minute, we get it before then, but at least that's a timeline that you can look forward to and prepare for. So on to the earnings. Trulieve reports record third quarter 2021 results and 15th consecutive profitable quarter as they continue execution of hub strategy with Harvest acquisition, U.S. leader with 155 retail dispensaries now and 3.5 million square feet of cultivation and processing capacity. Very impressive. We're just going to scroll down to the numbers right away though and take a look. Total gross revenue, and this is again just for Trulieve as the deal closed, I think, at the end of the first day of this most recent quarter. So 224 of just Trulieve revenue, up from 136.3 1 year ago, which is a 64% increase. And then if we compare for 9 months ended, last year at this point of time, they would have brought in $350 million in revenue. Now, so far, they've already brought in $633 million in revenue, which is a change of 79%. Gross profit, they increased that up to 153.9, up from 102.2, 51% year-over-year increase. And the only downside I'd say to this entire, earnings report is that their gross profits decreased from 75% to 69%, which is not ideal to see. But of course, 69% are still very healthy gross margins that you can be proud of. So that's worth noting. Their operating expenses have increased quite a bit, 87.7 million, up from 42.7 million, as they've expanded, which is a 105% increase, while their operating expenses have increased, obviously reflecting that 39%, up from 31% a year ago, while their net income, though, was positive, bringing in a positive 18.6 million cash flow from operations, up from 17.4 million last year at this time, with adjusted earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization of 98 million, up from 68.7 million last year at this time, which is an increase of 43%. So all in all, healthy, strong fundamentals and another profitable quarter from Trulieve, which makes me a happy shareholder. And I try to look more at the year-over-year numbers, and this shows strong growth to me. Now, I'm just doing the financial highlights. If you wanted to actually go through the comprehensive income statement and cash flow statement, you can go through the company's 10Q and grab that link here. But I just want to cover some of the events, as obviously you'll get more information if you watch many of my videos and episodes over time. But they completed the acquisition of Harvest Health and Recreation on October 1st, 2021, while also closing $350 million private placement of 8% senior secured notes due October 2026, representing industry-leading terms for U.S. plant-touching cannabis operators, while also retiring $270 million of high-cost and short-term Harvest debt, including debt due upon change in control, and retired $18 million in Trulieve payable notes. And in states, they've opened first medical dispensaries in West Virginia with new retail locations in Morgantown and Weston, and converted 14 former Harvest dispensaries to Trulieve branded retail locations and opened 3 Trulieve locations in Florida. And that did not take long, so they're executing. Currently operating now 155 retail dispensaries and 3.5 million square feet of cultivation and processing capacity across the U.S. And the few things to highlight here, just that Trulieve and Harvest combined third quarter revenue of approximately $316 million, net loss of approximately $9.8 million, and adjusted EBITDA of approximately $121 million. So that would give them the best adjusted EBITDA in the entire industry, but at the same time, the fact that they just had a net loss of $9.8 million, if they can improve that by next quarter and report profitable, that's going to, put Trulieve, I think, really ahead of the pack. But just to add, positive cash flow from operations of $75.1 million for the 9 months ended September 2021, and they also have cash of $213.6 million as of September 30th, 2021. So those are the Q3 financial and operating highlights I just wanted to add on. But again, solid quarter out of Trulieve. Love to see it. and we're just waiting on that news of SAFE to change this trend. On to Verano, they announced third quarter 2021 financial results as the company reports top-line sequential growth and industry-leading EBITDA while expanding national footprint to over 1 million square feet of active cultivation and 89 operating dispensaries during another acquisitive quarter, which means that they were busy buying, but in time we're going to see whether those purchases do end up paying off. So total revenue for Verano, $206 million, up from $196.7 million last quarter, but then year over year up from $100 million.5 last quarter. So obviously significant year over year growth, which is great to see. However, the growth slowed down quarter over quarter, much like we did see with other MSOs also. While their cost of sales reduced significantly, so this was impressive for me to see. Very nice to see that they spent $98.5 million last quarter, only $73.4 million to make the same amount of money. So that catches my eye as well. For profit of $133.3 million before fair value adjustments of biological assets, or from my understanding, cultivated cannabis that they have in inventory that they have yet to sell, for gross profit margins before changes in fair value of biological assets of 64.5%. So good job, Verano. As much as I've already invested all my money and made my picks, I don't have any cash. Seeing these margins just made me wish I had a little bit more to add to Verano. But hey, it is what it is. Just good to see that companies are actively working to improve their fundamentals, because it does matter in time. While their net effect of changes in fair value biological assets added on to the cannabis that they could sell that they've recently cultivated, $88.8 million worth, for total gross profit of $222,173,000. Well, if we look at their expenses, selling, general, and administrative decreased again significantly to $31.5 million, down from $53.3 million. So that is also very impressive to see. And then, so if we just take a look, income from operations, $186.5 million, up from $18 million last quarter. But there is a lot of accounting trickery that they can do where, certain quarters they're paying taxes, certain quarters they're not. So that's why they have a lot more income from operations one quarter versus others. So just wanted to highlight that. But in the end, after all said and done, especially, it seems like they probably paid a hefty $280 chunk here, income tax expense. For net income, though, a positive net income of $103.7 million. So great job, Verano. And then some other highlights up here just to go through. Subsequent operational highlights, Verano secured additional non-dilutive liquidity to support further inorganic growth, upsizing its credit facility by $120 million while lowering its cost of capital. And the restated credit agreement also provides the option for an additional $100 million term loan, the same non-dilutive rate. While in November, the company announced three accretive acquisitions in Connecticut, including 2 active dispensaries and 1 217,000 square foot cultivation and production facility. The acquisitions will position the company for sustainable growth by accelerating vertical integration ahead of the state's transition to adult use. So they are getting into Connecticut ahead of that. Well, third quarter operational highlights, just to cover them quickly. In third quarter, Verano further expanded its retail footprint with 7 new dispensaries across its core markets in Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, including the first Zen Leaf store in Philly and its flagship drive-through dispensary in Pittsburgh. And as of date, the earnings report, Verano has 89 dispensaries and 12 cultivation and production facilities. While the company closed its acquisitions of Agrikind and Agronomed, which added active cultivation and production while expanding its retail footprint in Pennsylvania, subsequently the company has 12 active dispensaries in Pennsylvania with the ability to open 6 additional storefronts and a second large-scale cultivation facility, which is currently under construction. So on top of that, the company maximizes its retail footprint in Ohio at 5 dispensaries with the acquisition of Mad River Remedies in Dayton. The company announced the acquisition of Sierra Well, which will expand distribution in Nevada with 2 high-volume dispensaries in Reno and Carson City, and an additional 10,000 square feet of cultivation and capacity in Reno, which is expected to strengthen the company's supply chain in northern Nevada. And so Verano, much like other MSOs, are aggressively expanding. So it's just our job as investors to pay attention to these numbers when they do come out, and just make sure that as much as they're buying other companies that might not be running as up to speed as their operations are, that over time they're increasing their revenues, reducing their cost of goods sold, and ultimately improving their income from operations and cash flow, making them a profitable company, because that is what makes you a sustainable company over time. So last thing, just to highlight, net income, including the impact of biological assets, was $104 million. Excluding the impact of biological assets, obviously net income was just $15 million in the quarter of 2021 compared to $32 million reported in the second quarter. But including the impact of biological assets, cash flow from operations was $68 million and free cash flow was $35 million. So that was the last bit of Verano that I just wanted to highlight, but I'm, again, happy to highlight these tier 1 MSOs because I think that they're very solid companies and that they're not going to be going anywhere. Some of their tier 2, tier 3, they're going to require a lot more paying attention to because they're just smaller, and it's going to be more difficult to compete with some of these bigger companies that have established themselves and are already profitable in the fastest growing emerging market in the US, in the largest market in the world. So lots of positive things to look forward to in this industry. Some other MSOs is Cresco Labs Flagship Illinois Dispensary opens steps from Chicago's Wrigley Field. So they're happy to announce the grand opening of its flagship SunnySide dispensary located 300 feet from the iconic Wrigley Field marquee. The ceremonial ribbon cutting will take place this morning with elected officials, community leaders, and company executives. Adding, this is a one-of-a-kind SunnySide that will better accommodate our existing patients and consumers and act as a showcase for the millions of visitors to the Wrigley neighborhood each year. It will feature unique product activations, 21 points of sale, and plenty of space to serve patients and customers on high-traffic days when baseball games, concerts, and large-scale events are taking place next door, said Charlie Bachtel, Cresco Lab CEO and co-founder. So I love sharing this because it just highlights execution, because I shared the story about a month and a half ago when they got this building for the new location, and to upsize, it looked like a piece of crap. Now they've upgraded it with a nice facelift, and it looks really good. So good to see Cresco Labs executing as well, and I imagine this is going to draw the attention of consumers wanting to know what SunnySide is all about. While Curaleaf Holdings announces distribution agreement with Southern Glazers wines and spirits for Curaleaf hemp and select CBD. So this seems like a smart move, especially if they're allowed to transport hemp and select CBD products across state lines. I'm not sure if interstate commerce applies to that, so please let me know in the comments. But this is good news for them if they can, because it announced it has signed a national distribution agreement with Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits, the world's largest distributor of beverage alcohol. The agreement will bring Curaleaf's lineup of products from the eponymous hemp and select CBD product lines into Southern Glazers distribution network. So whether they're actually working together right now, we don't know, but signing this distribution agreement means like they plan to probably get in business together at some point in the future, maybe once they sort out these laws. But just imagine once you can actually move cannabis across state lines, it's going to make things really interesting, although I think that's still very far out. Well, Todd Harrison shared a few snippets that I did want to feature on here, so thank you, Todd, for sharing. This one comes from Camilo on U.S. Cannabis from BTIG, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'd recommend if you wanted to read it or go through, so you can pause to read this snippet if you want. These are just the 3 bullet points. And then you can pause to read that, or you can grab the link below as well. But thank you, Todd, for sharing this, because it does provide some insight. Adding, prospects for federal legislative have increased dramatically, and this is referring to safe passing in the NDAA. It's really just a 50-50 chance. We're going to have to see what happens. Well, this one is also Todd Harrison, AGB on cannabis. So I'll pause here, or I'll show it. You can pause to read if you want. Otherwise, you can just grab the link below. And then lastly, just a few state developments. Jeremy Wallace, a source for Houston Chronicle, highlighting better work starting first full day on campaign trail in San Antonio with the Communications Workers of America, declares it's time to legalize cannabis in Texas. So it's still very early, but we'd love to hear someone running for office in Texas saying that it's time to legalize in their state. Because when you remember that Texas is a market of 29 million people, if they were to reform their laws, which would be wise and provide a lot of benefits, you best believe that the US MSOs and investors in those MSOs like you and I would be very happy for them to get in there first and properly supply that demand legally if given the chance. Well, on to an update from MJ Biz Daily, as Connecticut is set to launch recreational cannabis before New York, which is not necessarily a surprise because New York has just stalled and taken so long. Connecticut is much smaller, but let's see what we can expect. As Connecticut's projected 750 million recreational cannabis market is unlikely to match the size of neighboring New York's, but it's poised to launch first and might turn out to have as strong, or if not stronger, a social equity program, experts agreed. State regulators said recently that they're aiming for a relative full-year launch by end of 2022, while New York's projected $22 billion market is likely slipping into spring of 2023. So not what we want to hear, but the good news is that there are already plenty of growing and expanding markets that do exist. So once these do open up, it's really just going to be icing on the cake. And then lastly, Indiana Democratic Party backs cannabis, or not lastly, but lastly for the U.S., Indiana Democratic Party backs cannabis legislation or legalization and pledges 2022 reform push. As the Indiana Democratic Party is obviously waking up to the momentum that the Republicans are building, so they're mounting a push for cannabis legalization and calling on state lawmakers to enact the reform. If the GOP-controlled legislature fails to pass the legalization bill during the 2022 session, the party organization said Democrats are prepared to campaign on the issue, leveraging the popularity of ending prohibition among Indiana voters. So good job, Indiana Democratic Party. And lastly, just to highlight this news out of Germany, pot of gold, obviously, as cannabis could bring Germany $5 billion a year according to a survey. So let's see what the survey was looking at. Legalizing cannabis could bring Germany annual tax revenues and cost savings of about 4.7 billion euros or 5.37 billion USD and create 27,000 jobs. I think it could create a lot more jobs than that, given, the amount of jobs that the US has created, over 321 million at the start of this year, 321,000, so not 321 million. A survey said on Tuesday as politicians thrash out the rules for the budding sector. Chancellor-in-waiting Olaf Scholz and his center-left Social Democrats are in talks with the environmentalists, pro-spending Greens, and the libertarian business-friendly Free Democrats to build a three-way coalition. So just to add, the survey by the Institute of Competition Economics at the Heinrich Heine University in Dusseldorf and commissioned by the German Hemp Association found that legalizing cannabis could lead to an additional tax revenues of 3.4 billion euros per year, which, yes, it likely will. At the same time, it could bring cost savings in the police and judicial system of 1.3 billion euros per year while creating tens of thousands of jobs in the cannabis economy. Because yes, cannabis reform is a no-brainer at this point in time, and if you don't reform your laws based on just the reality of what this actually creates for people that live in a state or country that legalizes cannabis and for the benefits that it provides, you're just doing your citizens a disservice. So that is it for today's episode, folks, and I want to thank you for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned or the earnings releases from Trulieve and Verano? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it. Subscribe if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I'll catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.